Hey there, Facebook friends and family. It's Patricia here, and I am checking back in with you guys to restart the Advocacy Academy and the 15-minute Advocate. Got some sirens going on in the background. But anyway, it's been a minute, and I got chastised a couple of weeks ago about the fact that someone was going to check in, and they're like, hey, when's the last time you did your 15-minute Advocate? So I am back. It's been a crazy busy summer and lots of things going on. So it's back, and today we're not going to waste any time, and we're going to talk about those folks who are scared to talk and to present and what they need to do in order to make it happen. I keep running into people who are like, yeah, I really need to talk to you. I really need your help because I don't know what to say or when to say it or how to say it and all of that. And so in just a few minutes, I'm just going to share with you some quick tips to help you get to the point where if you have to make a presentation, whether it's planned or unplanned, what it is you can do to help ease your anxiety and to make a presentation or to prepare so that you can feel comfortable with what it is you're doing. And so the key to it is to have a conversation. When you sit down to prepare something and you're thinking about it in terms from, like, if you're sitting down with your friend or your neighbor or your colleague, depending on what the subject matter is, but if you're sitting down to have a conversation with them, if you think about that, things will flow much easier than if you are like all worked up and you're like, I don't know what to say next, how do I say it next, whatever. Don't get it all caught up in that just yet, because there's keys to and tips to the structure, and we'll talk about that in future sessions. But right now, when it's time to sit down and to figure out what it is you're going to talk about and how you want to address it and in what level of depth, think about it as you're sitting down to have a conversation with a friend, with a colleague, with someone who's appropriate for the subject matter, and how you might start having that conversation. It may start off with a question. That's a great way. You know, when someone says, well, hey, how do you do X? And you just start talking about it. You're like, yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that because I get that question, whatever. Think about that. So whether it's number one, perhaps it's an answer to a question. Or number two, let's say if the conversation is getting started because someone has come to you with a problem. And they're like, I really have this problem. You know, here's the situation. What's the solution to it? Okay. And if you approach your conversation with, you know, that's great, here's some of the things that I've come up with in dealing with it, and start having again the conversation with regards to answering or identifying the solution to a problem, right? Another way to think of it is if you're just sitting down and you're exploring. So let's say you're the person who is looking to find new answers to a situation, a project, or something like that. And if you approach it in that way and you start crafting and thinking about what are the things I might talk about, who might I talk to in order to get a better grasp of this information, of this topic, and how you might approach it. So if I have no idea on what in the world to talk about when it comes to helping engineers identify their gaps in their speaking and in their presentation skills and what's unique to them that I may be able to help them, I might sit down and call up one of my engineer friends, say, hey, what exactly is your deal? You know, like, if as an engineer, what are some of the things that you think might be helpful to help, you know, you or your colleagues in trying to be better presenters, to be better speakers? Okay, so maybe you are the one initiating the questions and finding a solution to something that is a real or perceived problem. So there's lots of ways in which you can do it. But again, it's about having a conversation. And when you're having a conversation, what happens? So besides figuring out how to identify what the topic is, What about how you engage in the conversation? When you're sitting down to have a conversation with someone, or maybe you're standing up and it's just spontaneous, that's one of the things. Sometimes conversations occur spontaneously and you can get information that way. If you're just run into someone, you start talking and you start learning a lot about something you hadn't thought about, or an issue or question that had been raised before and you just didn't know if this person had the answer to it. Or perhaps it's planned, where you've had an opportunity to sit down, identify some people who would be good resources, and then to call them up to say, hey, I would love to be able to have a conversation. I'm exploring this issue. Can I have take 10, 15 minutes of your time to explore that in a greater way? That's another way of doing it. But again, it's about sitting down and defining what it is you want, what it is you want to talk about, and then how you approach it, or how do you get more information about it. And again, when you're having a conversation, you're listening. That's the key thing. You're not just talking. Having a conversation is a two-way street. So that means that while you're giving information, you also have to be willing and able to receive information. And so many times people miss out on that because they're so caught up in what it is they need out of it that they forget, if I just be quiet and quit trying to say what it is I think I need and how I think you should answer it, and just listen to what's provided, that will, number one, help you to slow down your thinking. And number two, it will also help you to hear something that perhaps you might not hear if you were still all caught up in your brain and trying to answer prepare the next question before you can even get the answer to the last one. Okay. So remember, you gotta be able to listen. It's really, really important, because if you want to be able to give and receive, you have to be an active participant, which means you have to be on the listening end as well as the giving of information end. So that's real, real important when you're thinking about having a conversation. The last thing is, when you're having a conversation, is to leave room for exploration, because sometimes we just jump in there. It's like, yeah, I need this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we good. All right, now I'm bye. Well, guess what? You may be leaving out something, or you may be leaving out an opportunity to gain even more. So perhaps maybe you may run out of time when you're having that conversation, but just leaving it simple and saying, I would love to be able to explore this further with you. Well, when you're thinking about in terms of doing a presentation, that's that piece. That's how you get to the Q&A session. And well, again, that's a structural thing, but you'll get to that. Is you have to leave room for the fact of, you may not have answered all of the questions, or you may have missed something. Guess what? It's okay. You can acknowledge that in your presentation, and as you're preparing, that there may be more to this that I haven't learned about yet, but when I do, I'll be more than happy to share it, to update you, to update the presentation accordingly. And so that's real, real important as well. So again, thinking about this from terms of conversation, what it is you're going to talk about, how you're going to research or learn more about it by instigating new conversations with different people, and then the format in which you seek that information, whether you're asking the questions, whether you're receiving properly, and about again, talking back and forth, listening, engaging in that. And finally, one of the things that's really, really important is kind of related to the last one, which I says when you leave room for follow-up, which is literally to leave space to sit down while you're thinking, and then to stop and go do something else. I'm a big fan of that whole, the things you learn when you put down that issue or that concern and you go do something completely unrelated, that all of a sudden there are lots of answers and things that are revealed to you during the course of that, because what you're doing is you're giving your brain a break, and you are now allowing it to process and to be more creative in how it's approaching something, and the answers or additional questions that may come to you that will be helpful to you. How many times have you walked away from a conversation and you feel like there was more but you couldn't get to it, and you're like, okay, fine, but then an hour later, a day later, whatever, a week later, all of a sudden that thing that was niggling at you that you weren't quite sure about, it comes to you, and you're like, oh. and you're, I gotta write that down. I need to follow up with so-and-so and ask that question, or say, hey, here's an answer to that. Give yourself that kind of freedom also when you're thinking about how to prepare, because again, it's that conversation, it's that giving back and forth. And when you are, if this is your first presentation or your 15th, we can always use this as a guide, because there's so many times I may be ready to start something and I've written down a topic. I do that a lot. I write things down electronically on my phone or in a journal, a notebook that I keep of ideas. And a lot of times I may not know where that's going to head, but I write down just that snippet. And then when I'm having a conversation with a friend, or someone says, hey, I saw this article and I thought of you, and I'm like, oh, that's that thing I was thinking about. And then that gives me an opportunity to follow up, and you're like, hey, you know what? I was just looking at this issue. I was just thinking about this. I am so glad you reached out to me, and then initiate a conversation. Again, I am still not working on the presentation yet. I am initiating a conversation that will help foster and feed the presentation as I get to it. And so whether you are developing a formal presentation or whether you are preparing, some talking points as you go to be an advocate for some issue before some political body or whatever, the same thing happens. The things you learn from initiating conversations will help feed what you have to say and how you approach it as you go along the way. So that's it. That's really pretty much the deal, is before you get all worked up and thinking about what I'm going to talk about, how I'm going to talk about it, think about if you're going to sit down and have, a nice cold, iced tea, some water with lemon, glass of wine, and you're going to have a conversation with a friend about this issue. How would you approach it? Because again, what that does to you mentally and physically even is it slows you down. It may energize you. That's not to say you can't gain energy from it, but it slows you down into a pace where you're out of anxiety mode and you're more in curiosity mode, and you are much more open about what it is you will receive and give in the course of a conversation, as opposed to if all you're worried about is what you're going to say next. That's completely different. You're not open, you're not available to providing the information or to receiving the information that you may need down the road. I mean, think about it. When you get into conversations with folks, particularly if they're ones that that involve a lot of angst or something that's really controversial, how you can get worked up and caught up in that. So I highly suggest that that's the first step, truly. Think about how you would approach it if you're just going to have a conversation on the topic, and what you would want to know, and how you would explore it, and who you would talk to, and the things that you might leave open to acknowledging you may need to follow up on later, even though there'll be fantastic ideas or things to think about. That will help you a great deal and foster so much information, energy, and really a positive reinforcement for giving you the confidence that you need to address the issue, to address the presentation, whatever it may be, from a point of strength and confidence, as opposed to one of insecurity or or lack. That's pretty much it. Okay, well, that is it for this episode of the 15-Minute Advocate. I look forward to following up with you. Next time, we're going to start talking a little bit more about the structure of when you want to make a presentation and how you can kick things off with a really strong introduction, and how that can help you in order to guide you to what it is you want to say and do next in your speech, in your presentation, whatever it may be. All right, take care. Have a great week. And don't forget, I will be posting these at 1 o'clock on Mondays. And also, if you have any questions, check it out on my website, Patricia V. Hayes. That's Patricia, V as in Victor, HAYES.com. And also, I'll try and make sure to link it up. It'll be on the business page as well. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. Bye-bye.